Hey y'all, I'm Blake Hawkins here with the Kentucky Welding Institute, and I'm joined with
Mackenzie Schurr. I run Up and Smoke Welding Apparel.
I think today we're mostly just going to be talking about the differences between pipeline welding, which is what you started out doing, and some refinery work or just single hand work, welding TIG rigs and stuff.
Yeah, so basically I got into welding probably, it would have been 2005. So I'm out of Canada, so it's a little different up there. You can't just get your certifications and then go out and weld. We do 3 years of schooling, and that's to weld pipe. So you got to do 3 years of schooling, and then from there you go graduate, get your journeyman ticket, and then from there you're able to go and get your bead pressure ticket. So bead pressure allows you to get into pressure piping, and then really from there you can go and get all your different, your stainless, your Inconels, downhand tickets, small bore, all that different type of stuff. So yeah, I basically kind of worked by hand probably for about 3 years, and then the last of it pretty much was rig welding all over the western side of Canada. So it was, it's a lot different. I know in the comparison with this video, we're talking kind of the differences between rig welding and single hand. So I don't know a whole lot about that down this way. So you kind of let me know and we'll compare.
Well, I guess a lot of the things I do at the school, at the end of the day, we'll do like a Q&A. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is camper or no camper? Were you a camper guy yourself?
So it really depends. So up north, we have massive oil fields, and on those oil field sites, a lot of them have massive, like, I think the biggest man camp I was in, there was a 10,000 man camp spread between 5 different camps. So the way a lot of it works in the northern section of Alberta, where I'm from, is you basically fly in. So they'll get you on a 747 jet. They got their own airport on site. You fly up there. Obviously, the first shift, you got to get your welding truck up there. And then after that, you basically fly in and fly out, and you're stuck in these massive camps. So they feed you, they shower you, they got bedding, absolutely everything. They got gyms, they got arcades. It's awesome. But it depends. So you got that side, and then you start working in a lot more remote areas where the sites aren't as big. And those sites, they basically give you what's called LOA, so a live out allowance. And you could either bring your camper up, or for me, I never really had a camper, so I basically found a condo or a townhouse in basically any town that I was in, and I just rented a condo or a townhouse for the length of the job, and that's the way I kind of did it.
Well, I guess you've done it a whole lot like myself would do, or a lot of the other people I've worked around. I never personally had a camper myself. I always only going to jobs for a few months at a time, so I never seen the need to haul a camper down there. I'd just stay in a hotel or what a lot of people I see doing now are the Airbnbs.
Yeah.
You're able to rent those out for long periods of time.
Well, especially when you get into jobs where you're not guaranteed the length of time. And honestly, being in the oil patch, that's one thing that these kids coming in got to understand is not every job is as long as the boss says it's going to be. They usually feed you a line to get you in. You go in there expecting kind of like 2 weeks to a month and then kind of get a feel from it, and then you kind of know from there. But for me, I always lived in the city, so to have a big, massive trailer, I couldn't put it anywhere. I couldn't put it on my property because I lived on a smaller city lot, and most of the homes I've lived at throughout my life. So for me, a camper just never really made sense for me.
Yeah, that's another thing that always deterred me from it was I'm not much of a camping guy, so if I was to have the camper myself, just to go out and work would be fine, but whenever I'm not working, I'm going to have to use this thing as a lawn ornament sitting in front of the house.
Exactly, and it's another payment. I see a lot of kids, they ask the question, well, it's a good write-off. 100%. If you're into camping, that is one of those things that for a company write-off, you could save a ton of taxes on. So that is one thing to kind of look at and consider. But yeah, for me, camping, I'm not a camper, man. Never have been, so it didn't make sense to me.
And I know a lot of people, they justify it. I mean, a camper lot rent for a month, say anywhere from $800 to $500 a month, compared to a week per hotel, wherever you go. So, I mean, the cost, you're going to save a lot of money there, but then you got your camper note.
Yep.
And then you got to be able to keep the upkeep of the camper as well. You definitely don't want to be blowing no tires going on a trip. You
100%.
got to leave a few days early so you can factor that possibility in.
But I think another big thing that a lot of people don't factor into it. I'm 36. I got into welding when I was 18. I stopped welding in 2014 when I started my apparel company. But within that almost 10 years of welding, I went through 3 downturns where you couldn't buy a job. And so a lot of people got to understand that when the money stops coming in, the leasing company don't care. They want their $1,000 a month or $700 or whatever it is. And so that's another factor that you got to bring in is, okay, if this job doesn't work out or I can't find work, I got to figure out how to pay possibly the next 2, 3, 4 months worth of payments when I got nothing coming in. So that is a big thing that I think people have to factor in. And that's why I always liked condos and townhouses is I basically went into each place talking with the owner saying, hey, this is what I'm being told. I got X amount of months here. This isn't a guaranteed. I'm going to rent this on a month-by-month basis. And then at least if, let's say on the 3rd week or the 7th week or something like that, they say, hey, job's done. You call up that owner, say, hey, I'm done. You got my money till the end of this month, and I'm out. And a lot of those people kind of get it when you tell them month to month at the beginning. It's month to month, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing you don't want to tell a lot of people coming in is don't be living outside your means, right? Don't be blowing all that money fast because, I mean, your first check coming in, you're pocketing $2,500, but those checks are only going to last about a month, and you're going to have a 2-month dry spell. So it's going to be hard to.
We've seen that. I always saw that meme and I loved it because I called one of my buddies this. You ever see the movie Dumb and Dumber where they come in the orange and baby blue tuxedo? That's how like rig welders are right when they come in, man. They're just flashing friggin' money, chucking it everywhere. I did the same thing when I was 20. When you're walking in with a $15,000 paycheck, it is the best thing in the entire world. But yeah, you have to learn quick that if you are going to make that money, you also got to be able to put it away for those rainy days because shit, man, they come around a lot more than people think.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
You got to be smart with your money for sure.
So what made you get in? So what made you stay single hand? Why didn't you go the rig welding route?
I guess, personally myself, I don't guess I ever really hit a dry spell enough. I kept busy enough doing refinery work, boiler work, even some nuclear work to keep me busy and making good money. I would personally like the opportunity to go and rig weld just to be able to say that I've done it and experienced that.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you can learn a lot from that side of things. But I always had the opportunity to work somewhere, or whether it be one refinery down here in Baytown, or I actually got the chance to work with SpaceX down in Cape Canaveral.
Cool.
So I mean, the work was always there for me. I never really had a point in time to where I was looking for work.
Yeah. So. I think for me, getting in the rig welding thing I love the most, if I'm going to be doing it, I'm going to be making the most amount of money as possible. I grew up in a section of the world that when I got into the patch, it was booming. So I got in. I always welded a lot throughout my entire apprenticeship, but I didn't learn how to fit. Everywhere I went, they taught me how to weld, and I didn't learn how to fit. Now, I could weld really, really good. But when I got out into the industry, and I think it's a learning lesson, and that's why when I came down to KWI there and some of the other schools that I've seen throughout the country, they are starting to bring that pipe fitting aspect into the schooling. So for me, when I got out, that was a huge learning curve, especially being a rig welder, because you're making that big money. You better know how to do absolutely everything. And you see a lot of guys just putting a welder in the back of the truck and throwing some leads in the back and a stinger and a helmet and a couple grinders, and they think they're a rig welder. You're going to look bad real quick if you don't know how to do a good majority of things. You can fake it till you make it on most things, but you have to know how to do quite a bit. So I always recommend for guys coming out of school or just getting in an industry, go work by hand. To me, I think that's super important. Learn how to fit, learn how to weld out of position, learn how to read prints, learn how to do all those things, because I think it's going to make you a better rig welder. I think if I were to do it again, I probably would have learned the pipe fitting aspect a little bit more. You don't have to know everything. Most jobs you go to, you have fitters. And I knew the basis of it, but when you are basically backed up into a hooch and they give you a pile of fittings, and a blueprint and say weld and you got no fitter, you're going to learn real damn quick. And I did. Took me a while. I was never the fastest welder, but I always passed my x-rays. But yeah, I think that's one thing I always recommend. I think if I were to redo it, I would have stayed by hand a little bit longer, learned how to do some other aspects of the trade because there's so much, and then probably would have got into rig welding after that if I were to redo it again.
Yeah, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket or one skill. You want to be very versatile, and I think that's something that we try to teach there at Kentucky Welding Institute. We do it all. From the welding, we do pipe fitting, we go over blueprints, and another thing that we're getting into quite a bit now is the rigging and signaling.
Yep.
So whenever you're in these refineries, you don't have to wait on your rigger or whoever it is to come fly the pipe in for you to weld. You can you can rig it up yourself, fly it in yourself, and then you can weld it yourself. So being a jack of all trades kind of deal.
Well, you know what, 100%. And honestly, I was never a TIG welder, never had the patience for it. It's not my thing. But I was lucky enough that I was always able to go from job to job to job after a while and rely on the skills that I had built up over the years. But there were some jobs I could have stayed longer if I knew how to weld stainless or Inconel or any of that other specialty type stuff, or knew how to TIG weld. Can I TIG weld? Yeah, I can TIG weld. Am I good at it? Hell no. So that's just one of those things, right? So I think having that versatility, and that's what I really appreciated about your guys' school when I finally got to get down there here in April, is you guys teach absolutely everything. And I think that's a really good way to make a well-rounded tradesman. 100%, right?
Yeah, we've had several students here recently and beforehand that I know of. They've come back and they'll tell us stories and stuff and things to hit on, but they'll tell us about how their foreman or supervisor, whoever it is, finds out that they are able to rig and signal. They'll call them in 2 weeks before the job starts, so that way they can help unload the trailers and stuff. And they're going to be making welder pay, because that's what they're hired to do.
Yeah.
But they have all these other skills there with them, so they're going to be 2 weeks before the job starts, run through the job welding, and then usually 2 weeks after the job starts to demob and clean it all back out.
And that's the thing, is once you kind of get it, when you're the first one in and you're the last one out, you know exactly who that construction manager is looking at. He's been here since day one, and he's here with us on the last day. Hey, man, I got another 4-month gig. Oh, yeah. You want to come along with us, right? So it makes you invaluable. I had my moments throughout my career where I didn't do that. And it maybe would have changed a few things. Don't burn bridges. Yeah. And that's another big one. I think that for the people coming into this trade it is a really, really, really small industry. Word travels fast, right? I burnt a bridge or two, man. I think most people have in their lives. It's just one of those things. But now, as I've gotten older and wiser, you got to you kind of see that, right? And it's something that I maybe shouldn't have done or looked at it a different way. But yeah. So working with SpaceX, that's pretty cool. That
was pretty neat. I was working on the same launch pad that they launched Neil Armstrong off of to go to the moon.
No kidding.
That was pretty neat. Yeah.
So what did you all do there?
It was all stainless.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was all anything from thin wall to heavy wall. We were welding up some of the fuel lines, coolant lines, and stuff to go to the rocket before they launched.
Okay. Yeah, I never got to really do anything super cool for that. I think the specialist, like the most special thing I kind of did was doing like cold water piping and all that for like all the x-ray machines at hospitals. Got to work in some museums, but most of the stuff I did basically throughout my career was pretty much all oil patch. It's pretty much the only industry where I'm at. So it's starting to diversify a bit, but yeah, it's kind of like Texas, man. It's oil patch and die down here, right?
Well, I mean, there's been good money in it for a long time, so I mean, why would you try to change it?
Well, that's exactly it. So what would you recommend? So you work at a school, you instruct all these kids. Is the number one thing that these kids are wanting to do is become a rig welder? Is that like the main goal?
That's what a lot of them come in to do. And then, I mean, a lot of them, they do come out and go and hit that rig welder path, but something that I have seen is that rig welder, it's a hard job to get into. You've got to know somebody for sure to be able to get into it. And one thing that we always try to tell our students to start out is try to start out as a helper.
Yep.
First, because that's the only way you're going to learn the majority of the stuff that you need to know on the rig or the line. Is to start out as a helper, and then once you get your foot in the door, then you can try to take that test. Because there's only so many things we can teach you there at the school. We can teach you how to pass that test.
Yep.
Just passing that test, that ain't going to keep that job. You might be able to pass the test, but you ain't going to.
So when these kids come back and they've done their first couple gigs, do they come back and they're like, wasn't expecting that? Because you guys have lifetime practice where a student can come back and learn how to do something else or kind of brush up on the skills that he already has. Have you had a lot of kids come back and they're like, holy shit, this was a lot more different than I thought it was going to be out there, or no?
No, usually the one thing that everybody comes back and says is that we were a whole lot more strict than the industry is. And I think that's a good thing to have.
That is a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. But I know I've had several students come back and tell me that we were a lot more strict than what they were out there. And I do think that's a good thing to be, because you're setting a high standard. Right? If our standard's so high and they're blowing through our test all the time with such a high standard, then out in the real world it shouldn't be an issue.
Shouldn't be as hard, right? Yeah, it's definitely something going out into the field. And it's the one thing I wish I would have been able to do something later on in my life with the school that I went to. But that was a huge factor in how I was educated with the school that I went to, which is one of the biggest schools in southern Alberta there, which is SAIT. But you just weld in a booth. And that's the one thing of coming down here to the U.S. and working with all these different schools and being able to travel to all these different facilities is you guys put the kids in real life situations. And I was fortunate enough that throughout my entire apprenticeship, all I did was weld, and I got in some really goofy situations where it is not comfortable. You cannot see what you're welding. You are using a mirror, or you're bending a 14-inch rod at 1.5 inches and wrapping your arm around a bunch of pipe to get a weld that you're looking at a lens over here that's bouncing here and whatever, right? So I that's what I've really appreciated, especially about your guys' school, is that you guys really educate these kids as much as you can in those real life situations. Because when you get out there, man, welding is not welding in a booth.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, we can only simulate it so much because we are a school. But I mean, that's something that we try to do, and that's part of the reason we always send our instructors back out every so often to go work on a job, just to see what experiences they run into on those jobs. Then they bring that experience back. And that's something that we always try to instill in the program at that point in time, just to help get those students ready for that. But like you said, there's only so many simulators that we could have, or making people weld out of position, or on a different machine, or on the floor, standing up in a harness in a rack.
Yeah.
There's only so many things as a school that we can do to prepare them for that real world, because in the real world, I mean, you're only going to have, not unless you're in a fab shop position where you're always welding out of a jack stand. Most of the time, you're going to be in a bind.
Yep.
And they're going to expect the same out of you as they would as if you were welding in a jack stand.
100%.
Yeah. The expectation's going to be the same.
Yeah, 100%. So I think a lot of people want to know. I think the biggest reason anyone wants to become a rig welder is money.
Yeah.
So I guess, for me, in the industry that I was in within Canada, your average rate was anywhere, depending on the time of year. I shouldn't say time of year. I started in 2007, so that rig rate was around that $85, $90 an hour. And right now, I've talked to some of my boys back home right now, and they're making anywhere from around 110 to 120 an hour. Diesel supplied on most jobs, grinding discs, a lot of welding jackets, gloves, all that different type of stuff. So I think that's why a lot of guys get into it. But there's also really good money in being single-handed doing that. So what was like the average wage that you would kind of come in if you were doing, let's say, like the specialty metals and that type of stuff?
So I'd say just being like a combo pipe welder coming out, bottom dollar would probably be around $32 an hour. But whenever you get once you get that much experience into it and you got the knowledge, you're able to go out and hit some of these specialty jobs. And on those jobs, you're making double time. So I actually had the opportunity to work with a double time company, SWS.
Okay.
So you're making 40 an hour and double. So and the way they done it was anything after 8 hours was double time. So,
So 40 and 80?
Yep.
And you're probably working a 12-hour day?
Yep.
Yeah, so $80 an hour for 4 hours of the day.
Yeah.
Even 40 is a fantastic wage, and you can live off of it,
Oh, yeah.
right?
And you can pocket a lot of money quick.
Yeah. I think a lot of people got to understand when they get into rig welding that it's all on you. It's now your company. You got to go out and create your image. You got to go out and create your clout, basically, and you got to go out and make those relationships. It's not super easy to just go up to a job and do that. And I think everyone just looks at it. It's just oil patch. No, man, there's so much other stuff out there. Oil patch is a little bit easier. Yeah, you got to know someone to get into it, but like not everyone's an oil patch, and it depends where you are within the country, right? If you're going to become a rig welder, let's say in the Midwest, you're not doing those type of jobs. You're doing like handrail stuff. You might be doing structural stuff at a meat plant or whatever. So you got to go out and build those relationships. It's your company getting that contract. So I think for a lot of people, I think working single hand, I think is a great way to start. And I think it's a way people should start going into the industry, right?
Most definitely. A lot easier, I think, to get so many more opportunities out there to get financially stable to where you can look toward that rig welding path.
Yep. Well, even for me, man, like I'll share a story. I'm not embarrassed by it. When I first got into rig welding, money was good. Industry was doing really well. I went out, bought a $70,000 1-ton diesel, built my skid. Because we run. I guess you guys call them tub decks or something like that up here. So basically, skid unit that goes in the back of the truck. Had toolboxes. Bought the welding machine. Bought all my tools. My journeyman that I was apprenticing under, being his helper, got me a job doing pile splicing. Had a job making $80 an hour, 85 at the time. Had it for 2 weeks, and that was it. It shut down just like that, and the industry kind of bottomed out, and I couldn't buy work. Like I couldn't find work anywhere, even in a shop, and I almost went 3 months without being able to find work even in a shop. And I went back to doing concrete. This is when I first started out. Like I was new. I wasn't even a journeyman really at that point yet. I was still an apprentice, 3rd-year apprentice. And it damn near sunk me. And I had to get my parents to help me out, make my truck payment for a couple months until I got my feet back underneath me. And then I got a job welding with my truck again. Shit, paid them off in the first 2 weeks. And then for the rest of my career, never had an issue. But I think going back to the whole trailer thing is when you're a rig welder, man, the bank doesn't give a damn if you don't have a job. So if you're going to go and invest the big money into a truck, be prepared to have some money put away from it and realize that if times get tough, those payments are still coming out. So I think that's another, from my personal experience, that's what happened to me. And I was fortunate enough that my parents were able to help me out at that time. I think I was only 20. Almost 21. So yeah, I almost got caught with it. But after that, it was always had money put aside, made sure things were paid off, saved money. And so that was kind of my experience going through it all.
You got a hard lesson quick then, I'd say.
Oh, you're dead. Yeah, absolutely, man. But you know what? It made me a better person. And I think one thing, guys, getting out into that industry is just be financially smart. You make a lot of money in this trade, but you can lose it super quick too. But you could also live a pretty darn good life. So I love welding. Welding's been an amazing part of my journey, and I recommend anyone looking to get into the trade, go for it, because you ain't gonna find a better trade. Yeah.
Well, I think that's about all we got here.
I think that's all we
Blake
got.
Hawkins again with
Absolutely, Mac. Absolutely, man. Appreciate the time. Thanks, guys.